Son abandons his mother on a deserted road with a duck, but what she does shocks everyone. Martha Miller pressed the white duck against her chest as tears streamed down her wrinkled face. Kevin's car, her only son, was already just a distant speck on the dirt road, cutting through the dry fields of the Midwest countryside. "I'm just going to buy cigarettes, Mom. Wait here, I'll be right back," were his last words before leaving, dropping her off on a rock by the roadside, with only an old backpack and that animal he had impulsively bought at a fair 3 days earlier. Martha didn't smoke. Kevin didn't either, and there was no store in that direction, only abandoned fields and wide-open sky. She knew this because she had grown up in that area, before moving to New York City when she married Arthur over 50 years ago. Her heart tightened with a certainty she tried to deny. Her son wouldn't be coming back. The duck stirred in her arms, letting out a soft sound that seemed comforting. Martha looked at the creature, those small dark eyes watching her with a strange calm. How had she ended up here? How had a 75-year-old woman who raised her son alone after her husband left, who worked 40 years as a teacher, who sold her own house to help Kevin pay off the debts from his failed business, now been abandoned on a deserted road with a duck in her arms? She closed her eyes, feeling the hot afternoon sun against her skin. She needed to think clearly. Kevin had insisted she sell the house she had lived in for decades, that simple but cozy 2-story home in the Upper West Side neighborhood. He said the money would save the restaurant he had opened with a partner, that it was just a temporary crisis, that soon everything would work out and he would buy a better house for them to live in together. Martha believed him. She always believed in her son. The money from the sale barely lasted 3 months. Kevin confessed that the partner had run off with part of the investment and that the suppliers were demanding payment. He asked for more. Martha gave him the savings she had tucked away, the money she had saved for years for emergencies. It wasn't enough. The restaurant closed, and Kevin started drinking. In the last 2 months living in the cramped house Kevin rented in Newark, Martha watched her son turn into someone she didn't recognize. The drinking became frequent, the unexplained disappearances, the shouting when she asked about work. He found a job as a rideshare driver, but the money seemed to vanish before the bills were paid. Then, 3 days ago, he came home excited about a white duck he had bought at a poultry fair. He said the creature was worth money, that he had a friend who raised these special breeds, that it was an investment. Martha found his sudden enthusiasm strange, but didn't argue. She took care of the duck as best she could, giving it food and water, keeping the animal in a corner of the kitchen. That morning, Kevin woke up saying they were going on a trip, that there was a buyer interested in the duck in a town in the countryside, that it would be quick, that she needed to come along to hold the creature in the car. Martha found it odd but agreed. Anything that might bring her closer to her son again was worth a try. Now, sitting on that rock with the duck in her arms, she understood there was no buyer at all. There was only a desperate son who didn't know how to handle the mother who had become a burden. She rummaged through the old backpack he had left. Inside, there were some carelessly folded clothes, a toothbrush, and an envelope. With trembling hands, Martha opened the envelope. Inside were $300 in crumpled bills and a note in Kevin's hurried handwriting. "Mom, I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. I need to start over on my own, and you just get in the way. Use this money to go somewhere. Don't try to find me." The words pierced Martha Miller's chest like knives. She read and reread the message, as if repeating it could change the meaning. The duck was quacking softly, and she realized she was squeezing the animal too tightly. She loosened her grip, taking a deep breath. There would be no tears. Not now. Martha put the note back in the envelope and placed it in her backpack. She looked around, trying to get her bearings. The road stretched straight for miles, bordered by soybean fields that looked abandoned. In the distance, in the opposite direction from where Kevin had gone, she spotted what seemed to be a gas station. She stood up from the rock, adjusting her backpack on her shoulders. The duck remained calm in her arms, as if it understood the situation. Martha started walking. Each step kicked up a little red dust from the road. The sun beat down mercilessly, but she kept going, one foot in front of the other. How long it took her to reach the station she couldn't say. It could have been 20 minutes or an hour. The world seemed to have stopped in that afternoon heat. When she finally arrived, her legs were shaking and her throat was dry as sandpaper. The station was small, with just 2 old pumps and a little shop that seemed to sell more dust than products. A man in his 40s was washing the windshield of a pickup truck parked near the pump. He looked at Martha oddly as she approached. "Miss, you all right?" he asked, and Martha almost smiled at being called Miss at her age. "I need water," she managed to say, her voice coming out hoarse. The man set the rag aside and went into the shop, returning with a bottle of cold water. Martha drank eagerly, feeling the liquid go down and soothe her throat. The duck seemed thirsty too, so she poured a little water into her cupped palm for the animal to drink. "Is that duck yours?" the man asked, watching the scene with curiosity. "It is now," Martha replied, not quite sure how to explain the situation. It was then that she noticed the station attendant, a skinny guy around 25, staring intently at her. He approached slowly, a look of recognition on his face. "Mrs. Miller," he said hesitantly. "Is it really you?" Martha looked more closely at the young man. There was something familiar about that face, but she couldn't place it. "I'm sorry, son, but I'm Tyler, Mrs. Miller. Tyler Cooper. You were my teacher at Lincoln Elementary School back in 1996, 3rd grade." The memory came back like a flash. Tyler Cooper, the shy boy who always sat in the back of the room, who struggled with math but loved English class. Martha had spent months giving him extra lessons after school, without charging a dime, until he finally grasped the basic operations. "Tyler, my God, how you've grown," she said, and for the first time since Kevin had left, she managed a genuine smile. "Teacher, what are you doing out here?" Tyler asked, looking around as if searching for someone. "Did you come to visit someone around here?" Martha hesitated. Part of her wanted to lie, to make up some story that wouldn't reveal the shame of being abandoned by her own son. But when she looked into Tyler's worried eyes, she couldn't. "My son brought me out here and left," she said simply, her voice low. "He's not coming back." The silence that followed was heavy. Tyler and the other man exchanged glances. It was the man with the pickup who spoke first. "What do you mean he's not coming back? He left you here on purpose." Martha just nodded, clutching the duck to her chest again. The animal seemed to be the only solid thing in a world crumbling around her. "That's outrageous," Tyler exclaimed, indignant. "Teacher, you can't stay here. Do you have somewhere to go?" The question echoed in the void. Martha had nowhere to go. She no longer had a home. She had no close relatives besides a distant cousin in Pennsylvania she hadn't spoken to in years. She had no friends she could bother with a situation like this. Kevin was all she had, and Kevin had discarded her like you throw away an object that's no longer useful. "I don't," she admitted, feeling the tears threaten to return. "I sold my house months ago to help my son." "Listen here," said the man in the pickup truck with a decisive tone. "I'm heading to Charlotte now, but I pass through Asheville. I can drop you off downtown. It's a bigger town with more resources. You can look for some help there." Tyler agreed immediately. "That's a good idea, Mrs. Miller. It's too isolated here. In Asheville, there are more people, more businesses. You'll be able to manage better." Martha wanted to refuse, to say she didn't want to be a bother, but the truth was she had no choice. She accepted the ride with a weak thank you. The man, who introduced himself as Walt, helped her climb into the pickup truck, and the duck was settled on her lap. As they drove away from the gas station, Martha looked out the window and saw Tyler waving. That young man she had helped decades ago was the first person to show compassion on that terrible day. She kept that in her heart like a small light amidst the darkness. The trip to Asheville took 40 minutes. Walt tried to make conversation a few times, but Martha answered with one-syllable responses. She was too tired to elaborate, and the pain in her chest seemed to grow with every mile. It was during the silence that she noticed something strange about the duck. The animal had a small metal ring attached to its left leg. Martha hadn't noticed it before, maybe because she was too distracted or because she had never looked at the duck so closely. The ring had numbers engraved on it: 28 in Pete Face, 42S, 49 to 23, 18W. "What numbers are those?" she murmured, more to herself. Walt took a quick look. "Looks like geographic coordinates," he said. Latitude and longitude. I've seen that on farm GPS before. Someone marked a location on this duck. But why? Who knows? Breeders do all kinds of things. Sometimes they mark where the animal was born, or where the main breeding farm is. That bird must be worth something. Martha looked at the duck with renewed interest. Was it possible that that animal had some real value and wasn't just another one of Kevin's impulsive ideas? She stored that information in her mind, deciding to investigate later. When they arrived in Asheville, Walt stopped in front of the central square, a wide space with wooden benches, leafy trees, and an old church in the background. It was mid-afternoon, and the square was busy with people coming and going, mothers with baby strollers, elderly men playing dominoes. "This is a good place to start," said Walt, helping Martha get out. "There are shops around, and usually older folks gather here. Someone will be able to point you in the right direction." Martha thanked him again, but before Walt left, something made her ask, "Why did you help me? You don't know me from anywhere." Walt gave a half-sad smile. "My mother was also abandoned once, Ma'am, by a boyfriend she supported for years. I was a kid, but I never forgot how much she suffered. If I could go back in time, I'd wish someone had helped her that day. So, I help whenever I can." The words touched Martha deeply. She waved as Walt got into the pickup truck and drove off, taking with him the last connection to the road where everything had fallen apart. Alone in the square with the duck in her arms and an old backpack on her back, Martha sat down on a bench in the shade. People passed by without paying much attention to her. To the world, she was just another elderly lady resting in the square. No one imagined the storm going on inside. She needed a plan. $300 wouldn't last long, maybe a week if she was extremely careful. She needed food, a place to sleep, and to figure out what to do with that duck, which now seemed to be the only constant in her life. A woman in her 60s walked by carrying grocery bags. Martha mustered up her courage and called out to her. "Excuse me, ma'am. Do you know where I can find a place that takes people who need temporary help?" The woman looked Martha up and down, her gaze stopping at the duck. "There's a city shelter on Main Street," she said without much emotion. "But I don't know if they take animals. You'd better get rid of that thing first." "Thank you," Martha murmured, but the woman had already walked away. "Get rid of the duck." The words echoed in her head. It would be the most practical solution, no doubt, but something inside Martha resisted the idea. That animal had been left with her, just as she had been left on the road. In some twisted way, they shared the same fate of abandonment. Martha sat on the bench for hours, watching the square's activity. She saw the shadows shift as the sun lowered in the sky. Children ran and played, street vendors hawked their goods, young couples strolled hand in hand. Life went on as usual for everyone except her. It was when it started to get dark that Martha noticed a group of elderly people gathering in another corner of the square. There were 5 or 6 of them, mostly men, sitting on nearby benches, talking loudly. One of them had a guitar and started playing an old song. Martha stood up and walked over, hesitant. The elderly folks stopped talking and looked at her curiously. "Good evening," she said, her voice still hoarse from all the walking and crying. "Good evening, ma'am," replied an older man with white hair and a thick moustache. "First time I've seen you around here. Are you new in town?" "I am," said Martha, deciding not to lie. "I arrived today. I have nowhere to stay." The silence that followed wasn't judgmental, but full of understanding. Those people knew the pain of loneliness, exclusion, and hardship. A plump woman in a floral dress patted the bench beside her. "Sit here, dear. What's your name?" "Martha. Martha Miller." "I'm Miss Dotty. This here is Walter." She pointed to the man with the mustache. "That's Otis, Lucille, John Paul, and Gerald. We all meet here every afternoon. Some of us have homes, others don't, but everyone is welcome." Martha sat down, the duck still in her lap. Gerald, a thin man with glasses, looked at the animal with interest. "That's a Peking duck, isn't it?" "I raised poultry for 40 years. I know one when I see it." "Yes, it is," replied Martha, surprised. "At least I think so. My son bought it at a fair." "May I see?" asked Gerald, holding out his hands. Martha hesitated, but something about the gentle way Gerald approached made her trust him. She handed him the duck, and he began examining the animal with an expert's care. He turned the duck from side to side, looked at its feathers, its feet, its eyes. "This here isn't any ordinary duck, Mrs. Miller," said Gerald after a few minutes. "This band on its leg, let me get a closer look." He took his glasses from his pocket and examined the metal band. His eyes widened. "I know this marking. This duck belonged to Felix Harrison." "Who?" asked Martha. "Felix Harrison was the most famous poultry breeder in the region," explained Walter. "He had a huge farm near here, raised special breeds, sold them all over the country. He took part in exhibitions, won prizes. He was well known." "Was?" repeated Martha, noting the past tense. "He passed about 3 months ago," said Miss Dotty sadly. "Heart. It was sudden. He left behind a wife and 2 kids. I heard they auctioned off all the animals from the farm because the family didn't want to continue with the breeding." Gerald kept examining the duck, growing more excited by the minute. "So this duck here must have been sold at the auction. But look, there's something strange about it, this ring. I remember that Felix used to mark his best animals with special coordinates. It wasn't the location of the farm, it was something else." "What could it be?" asked Martha, now completely intrigued. "I don't know, but I know someone who might." Gerald carefully handed the duck back to Martha. "Felix's wife, Mrs. Clara Harrison, she was the one who kept all the animal records. If this duck has a special marking, she'll know why." "But how am I going to find this woman?" "The Poultry Breeders Association is right here in town," said Gerald, "on Jefferson Boulevard near the City Market. There's a meeting there tomorrow morning. Mrs. Clara always goes, because even after Felix passed, she stayed on as an active member." Martha felt a spark of hope light up in her chest. Maybe that duck really was special. Maybe there was some value in it that could help her get out of this situation. Or maybe it was just the need for some purpose, something to do besides giving in to despair. "But tonight," she said, coming back to the immediate reality, "I need a place to sleep. Do you know any cheap place? I only have $300. The elderly folks exchanged glances. It was John Paul, who had been quiet until then, who spoke up. "There's Mrs. Gable's boarding house on Liberty Street. She charges $40 a night, but it's a simple room. I don't know if she'll take the animal." "Or else," said Miss Dotty, "you can stay at my place tonight. It's nothing fancy, but I have a couch in the living room where you can sleep. I won't charge you anything. Tomorrow you can figure things out." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us beginners. Now continuing. The offer caught Martha off guard. She looked at Miss Dotty, trying to understand why this stranger would be willing to help her without asking for anything in return. "Why would you do that for me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because I've been where you are," Miss Dotty replied simply. "When my husband left me 15 years ago, I was out on the street with 2 suitcases and not a penny to my name. It was a neighbor who took me in for a week until I could find a job as a cleaning lady. I never forgot that. Now that I have a house, small as it is, I like to give back when I can." Martha felt the tears return, but this time they weren't from pain. It was gratitude. It was relief. It was the feeling that maybe the world wasn't made up only of people who abandon you, but also of people who take you in. "I accept," she said. "And thank you so much." Miss Dotty smiled and stood up. "So, let's go. My house is close by. We can walk. But first let's stop by the market to get something for this duck to eat. And for us too. I bet you haven't eaten since morning." Martha realized Miss Dotty was right. Her stomach was growling with hunger, but she had been so lost in her worries that she hadn't even noticed. They said goodbye to the other elderly folks, who waved and wished them luck, and set off along the lit streets of Asheville. Miss Dotty's house was in a simple neighborhood, with cobblestone streets and small houses packed closely together. It was an old building with peeling walls and a rusty iron gate. But when Miss Dotty opened the door, Martha felt the warmth of a true home. The living room was tiny, with an old floral-patterned couch, a small coffee table with a crocheted doily, and a bookcase with books and picture frames. Everything was clean and tidy, despite being visibly worn by time. "Make yourself at home," said Miss Dotty. "I'll make a simple dinner. Rice, beans and fried eggs, is that okay?" "It suits me perfectly," Martha replied, her stomach growling in anticipation. While Miss Dotty cooked, Martha tended to the duck, giving it water and some grains of corn they'd bought at the small market. The animal ate eagerly, and Martha noticed how healthy and well cared for it looked. Whoever this Felix Harrison was, he had clearly devoted attention to his animals. During dinner, Miss Dotty told her own story. She had been married for 28 years to a man she met in her youth. They had 3 children together, raised their family with difficulty, but with love. Until one day her husband announced he had fallen in love with a younger woman at work and wanted a divorce. "He left home taking half of everything," Miss Dotty said, no bitterness in her voice, just resignation. "And my kids took his side. They said I was old, that it was natural for him to want a fresh start, that I should accept it and move on. I stopped talking to them after that." "I'm so sorry," Martha said, recognizing the pain in the other woman's eyes. "It's been 15 years. You learn to live with what you've got. I work as a cleaner at 3 houses, earn enough to pay my bills and eat. It's not the life I dreamed of when I was young, but it's mine. And at least now I know who I can trust." Martha told her own story then, about Arthur, who left when Kevin was just 5 years old, leaving her alone to raise the boy. About the years working as a teacher, the sacrifices to give her son an education, the sleepless nights when Kevin was sick. About how she always believed she was building a future where she'd have someone by her side in old age. "And now here I am," she finished, her voice breaking. 75 years old, with no home, no family, only a duck, and $300 in my pocket. Miss Dotty reached across the table and took Martha's hand. "You have more than that," she said firmly. "You have strength, you have intelligence, and you have that duck, which according to Gerald could be special. Tomorrow we'll find out what that means." After dinner, Miss Dotty fixed up the couch with clean sheets and a fluffy pillow. Martha lay down fully dressed, the duck sleeping in a cardboard box beside the couch. The house was quiet, only the distant sound of cars passing on the street. Martha stared at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened in a day that felt like it had lasted an eternity. That morning she still had a son. She had a roof over her head even if it wasn't hers. She had an illusion of family. Now she had only uncertainties, but she also had something she hadn't expected to find. The kindness of strangers, Tyler, Walt, Miss Dotty, Gerald. People who owed her nothing, but who chose to help anyway. That had to mean something. It just had to. When she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of the red dirt road, but this time she wasn't alone. There were people walking beside her, faces she couldn't make out clearly, but they gave her a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in a long time. The next morning she woke to the smell of fresh coffee. Miss Dotty was already up, making breakfast in the tiny kitchen. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "Sleep well?" "Better than I expected," Martha admitted, getting up and folding the sheets carefully. "The Poultry Breeders Association opens at 9, Miss Dotty said. "If we want to catch Mrs. Harrison there, we better head over right after breakfast." They had coffee with bread and butter, chatting about simple everyday things. Martha learned that Miss Dotty liked to crochet, had a small vegetable garden in the backyard, and watched soap operas religiously every night. They were small details, but they made Miss Dotty seem more human, more real. At 9:15 they were standing in front of the Poultry Breeders Association of Asheville. It was a modest one-story building with white walls and a wooden sign on the door. Martha held the duck carefully, feeling her heart beat faster. They entered a small reception area where a young woman greeted them. "Good morning. Can I help you?" "We're looking for Mrs. Clara Harrison," said Miss Dotty. "She usually comes here, doesn't she?" "Mrs. Clara is in the meeting room with other members," the young woman replied. "Is it something specific?" Martha stepped forward. "It's about this duck," she said, showing the animal. "We believe it belonged to her late husband, Felix Harrison." The young woman looked at the duck with interest, then at Martha. "I'll call her. Can you wait here?" They sat on uncomfortable chairs while waiting. Martha noticed posters on the walls showing different breeds of birds, photos of exhibitions, framed certificates. This was a completely unknown world to her. 5 minutes later, the meeting room door opened, and a woman around 60 came out. She was thin, with brown hair pinned up in a bun, wearing a blouse and jeans. Her eyes were red as if she had been crying recently. "You wanted to talk to me?" she said, her voice tired. Martha stood up, holding the duck. "Mrs. Clara, my name is Martha Miller. I was told this duck might have belonged to your husband." Clara looked at the animal and her face went pale. She approached quickly, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch the duck. "It can't be," she murmured. "It can't be." "What is it?" asked Martha, startled by her reaction. "That's Apollo," Clara exclaimed, her voice getting louder. "That's Apollo, Fortunato's champion duck. He disappeared from the farm 2 days before the auction. We searched everywhere, thought he had run away or someone had stolen him." "Champion?" repeated Martha, confused. "Apollo won 5 prizes in national exhibitions over the last 3 years," Clara explained, her eyes filling with tears. "He was Felix's pride, the most valuable animal in his whole flock. When he passed, I wanted to keep Apollo, but he vanished. How did you get him?" Martha felt the ground give way beneath her feet. That duck wasn't just special, it was extremely valuable. And now the widow of the original owner was right there, clearly wanting the animal back. "My son bought him at a fair 3 days ago," Martha explained, her voice coming out weak. "I didn't know—" "Bought him from whom?" asked Clara, getting more agitated. "I need to know. Who sold Apollo?" "I don't know," Martha admitted. "My son never said. He just showed up at home with the duck and—" "That's theft," Clara interrupted, her voice echoing through the reception area. "Someone stole Apollo from my farm and sold him, and you have him now." "I didn't steal anything," Martha protested, holding the duck tighter. "I didn't even know who the owner was." "It doesn't matter," Clara shouted. "Apollo is mine. He belongs to my husband's memory." The argument was drawing attention. Other members of the association started coming out of the meeting room to see what was happening. The receptionist picked up the phone, probably to call someone in authority. Ms. Dotty tried to calm things down. "Mrs. Clara, please, let's talk calmly." Martha wasn't at fault. "I want my duck back," Clara insisted, trying to take the animal from Martha's arms. Martha instinctively stepped back. She didn't know why she was resisting. That duck clearly belonged to Clara by right. But something inside her refused to hand over the animal. Maybe it was because the duck was the only thing she had. Maybe because giving it up would mean admitting that Kevin had done something wrong, possibly illegal. Or maybe it was just the stubbornness of an old woman who had already lost everything and didn't want to lose anything else. "No," said Martha, her voice coming out with a firmness that surprised her. "I'm not just handing it over. I need to understand what's going on. I need to know where my son got this duck." "You're refusing to return stolen property," accused Clara. "I'm refusing to hand it over without an explanation," Martha shot back. It was then that an elderly man stepped out of the meeting room. He was around 70, with completely white hair, and wore a well-pressed suit. There was authority in the way he moved. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice deep but calm. "Mr. Montgomery," said Clara, turning to him, "this woman has Apollo. Felix's Apollo. She's refusing to give him back, Mr." Montgomery looked at Martha, then at the duck, and his eyes widened in recognition. "It really is Apollo," he murmured. "Ma'am, may I examine the band on his leg?" Martha hesitated, but something about the polite way he asked made her agree. She kept the duck in her arms as Mr. Montgomery leaned in to examine the metal band. "Yes, this is Felix's marking," he confirmed. He used geographical coordinates to mark his prize-winning animals. Each coordinate represented the place where the animal won its first award. "So the coordinates aren't from the breeding farm," said Martha, remembering her conversation with Gerald. "No. They're from Denver, if I'm not mistaken. That's where Apollo won his first big prize 4 years ago. Felix was so proud he created this special marking system." Clara was growing more impatient by the minute. "Mr. Montgomery, please, tell this woman she needs to return Apollo to me." Mr. Montgomery raised his hand, asking for calm. "Mrs. Harrison, I understand your distress, but we need to handle this the right way." He turned to Martha. "Ma'am, did you buy this duck?" "My son bought it," Martha explained again. At a fair 3 days ago. I don't know the details. And where is your son now? Martha felt the shame burning her face. I don't know. He left me on a roadside yesterday and drove off. The silence that followed was awkward. Martha saw the looks of pity, of judgment, of morbid curiosity. Those people didn't know her story, but they were drawing conclusions. I see, said Mr. Montgomery finally. This is a complicated situation. Mrs. Harrison, do you have documentation proving that Apollo is yours? I have all the records, Clara exclaimed. Award certificates, registration documents from the association, photos. Then I suggest we do the following, proposed Mr. Montgomery. Let's verify all the documentation. If Apollo truly belongs to Mrs. Harrison, she has the right to get him back. But we also need to understand how the animal ended up at that fair. There may have been a theft, and that needs to be properly investigated. But in the meantime, who keeps the duck? Asked Ms. Dotty. He stays here at the association, decided Mr. Montgomery, in neutral custody until we resolve the situation. No, said Martha and Clara at the same time. Mr. Montgomery sighed. Ladies, be reasonable. We can't solve this by shouting at each other. We need time to investigate. It was at that moment that the association door burst open violently. Everyone in the reception area turned to see who was coming in, and Martha felt her heart freeze. It was Kevin. Her son walked in with long strides, his face red with anger or alcohol, she couldn't tell. He looked around until his eyes found Martha. Mom, he yelled. What the hell are you doing here? Kevin, Martha managed to say, her voice coming out in a whisper. How did you find me? I saw the duck through the window when I drove by on the street, he replied, approaching. I thought I'd gotten rid of you, but here you are causing trouble. The words hit Martha like slaps in the face. He didn't even try to hide it, didn't pretend to regret it. He was only there because he'd seen the duck and came to get it. Are you her son? Selina asked, her eyes blazing with fury. Was it you who stole my duck? I didn't steal a damn thing, Kevin yelled. I bought it from a guy at a flea market. I paid $200. The duck is mine. Apollo is worth at least $50,000, Selina shouted back. You stole him from my farm. Are you crazy, lady? I've never even seen your farm in my life. Mr. Montgomery tried to intervene, but chaos had already taken hold. Kevin and Selina screamed at each other, accusations flying back and forth. Martha pressed the duck against her chest, trying to process everything. $50,000. The duck Kevin had bought for $200 was worth $50,000. Suddenly, it all made sense. The guy at the flea market had probably stolen the animal from Felix's farm and sold it well below its real value to get rid of the hot merchandise quickly. Kevin hadn't known the true value, but now that he was finding out, Martha looked at her son and saw greed gleaming in his eyes. He wasn't there for her. He was there for the money. Kevin, she said, her voice cutting through the noise, you abandoned me on a highway yesterday. Kevin stopped yelling and looked at his mother. Don't start with that now, Mom. You know I didn't have a choice. I can't take care of you and myself at the same time. Then why are you here? For the duck, he said as if it were obvious. You heard the old lady. That thing's worth $50,000. That'll sort out my life. Your life, Martha repeated, feeling something break inside her. Not our life. Your life. Yeah, my life, Kevin confirmed without shame. Now give me that duck and stop making a scene. He lunged to grab the animal, but Martha stepped back. No, she said. What? Kevin stopped, incredulous. I said no, Kevin. You're not taking this duck. It's mine, I bought it. With money you stole from me, Martha shouted, her voice finally finding strength. You robbed me, Kevin. You robbed my home, my savings, my dignity. And then you threw me away like trash. You're not stealing anything else. The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone in the reception area stared at mother and son, witnessing that moment of final rupture. Kevin stepped forward, his face twisted in anger. You don't have the right. I have every right, Martha interrupted. I spent 50 years of my life raising you, protecting you, loving you, and you repaid me with abandonment. So now I decide, I won't let you profit off of one more thing that doesn't belong to you. Mrs. Clara, Martha said, turning to the woman. "I didn't know this duck was stolen, believe me, but I also can't just hand him over like that, because my son will try to take him anyway. So I'm making a proposal." "What proposal?" Selina asked, suspicious. "Let me take care of Apollo," Martha said. "I know you don't trust me right now, but I'm willing to prove I deserve that trust. Let me take care of him until that next exhibition you mentioned. If I do a good job, keeping him healthy and prepared, maybe we can talk about some kind of arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Selina asked. "I don't know yet," Martha admitted, "but I need time. I need a purpose, and I need to make sure that duck doesn't end up in my son's hands." Kevin exploded. "Are you all hearing this craziness? She doesn't even have a place to live. Where's she going to take care of the duck? On the street?" "He can stay at my house," Ms. Dotty said, surprising everyone. "I have a backyard. I can put Martha and the duck up." Mr. Montgomery watched everything closely. Finally he spoke. "Mrs. Clara, the decision is yours. But it seems to me that Mrs. Miller is being honest, and I have to admit her proposal is interesting. The next big show is in 2 weeks in Nashville. If Apollo enters and wins, the prize will help keep Felix's memory alive." Clara looked at the duck, then at Martha, then at Kevin. Her eyes filled with tears. "Felix always used to say that people show their true character when they care for animals," she said softly. "That anyone who mistreats an animal isn't worth much, but someone who protects an animal has a good heart." She looked directly at Martha. "You protected Apollo when you could have easily sold him. My son is right, you're being honest." "So," began Martha, hardly daring to hope. "You can keep Apollo temporarily," Clara decided, "but under conditions. You come here to the association every day so we can check on how he's doing. You learn everything about caring for the breed, and in 2 weeks you take him to the show in Nashville. If he wins, we split the prize 50-50. "I accept," said Martha immediately. "And I'm going to sue all of you," shouted Kevin. "That duck is mine." "No, it isn't," said Mr. Montgomery calmly. "You bought stolen goods, which technically makes you guilty too. I suggest you accept the solution being proposed here and be grateful no one wants to call the authorities." Kevin looked around, realizing he was cornered. Everyone was against him. His own mother had chosen a duck over her son. "Fine," he spat out. "Keep the damn duck. But don't come looking for me later, Mom. You made your choice." "I did," Martha agreed, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "And for the first time in a long time, I made the right choice." Kevin stormed out, slamming the door. Martha watched him leave through the window, and this time she didn't feel the urge to run after him. She only felt a deep sadness mixed with a strange sense of relief. It was as if she was breaking free from chains she had carried for decades. Clara approached and, surprisingly, touched Martha's arm. "I'm sorry for what you've been through," she said. "Losing a son that way, it's not easy." "I didn't lose him," Martha corrected. "I just finally saw who he really is." The two women looked at each other, recognizing in one another the pain of loss and betrayal. They were different in many ways, but at that moment they shared something deep. "Come," said Clara. "I'll show you all of Apollo's records. You need to know everything about him if you're going to take proper care of him." They spent the next few hours at the association headquarters. Clara brought out a thick folder with documents, photos, certificates. She showed Martha every prize Apollo had won, every show he had entered. She told stories about Felix and how he had loved that particular duck. "He was born on the farm 5 years ago," Clara recounted. "He was the smallest of the brood, so tiny that Felix thought he wouldn't survive. But he fought. He grew up strong and healthy. At the first show he entered, the judges were impressed by his posture, by the perfection of his feathers. He took first place in his category." Martha listened, fascinated, stroking the duck that slept peacefully in her lap. The more she learned about Apollo, the more she understood the responsibility she was taking on. Walt showed up at the association in the middle of the afternoon, curious to know what had happened. When he learned that Martha would be in charge of the duck, he immediately offered help. "I can teach you everything about the specific diet for this breed," he said. "I know how to make balanced feed. I know what supplements are needed to keep the feathers shiny. I can teach you." "I would be very grateful," said Martha sincerely. Mr. Montgomery also offered to help. "I'll arrange a temporary custody certificate," he said. "That way you have a document proving you're taking care of Apollo legally, in case your son tries anything." When they finally left the association, it was already late afternoon. Martha, Miss Dotty, and Apollo walked back to Miss Dotty's house. On the way, they stopped at a grocery store to buy more duck-specific food. "I don't know how to thank you," Martha said as they walked. "You opened your home to me, you're helping me." "We're helping each other," Miss Dotty corrected. "You don't know, but I was feeling very lonely. Ever since my kids stopped talking to me, the house has been too empty. It's nice to have company." At Miss Dotty's house, they set up a makeshift pen in the backyard for Apollo. Gerald had given detailed instructions on how to keep the space clean and safe. The duck seemed happy, exploring its new environment with curiosity. That night, Martha and Miss Dotty had dinner together again. But this time the conversation was different. It wasn't just about pain and loss. It was about possibilities, about the exhibition in Nashville, about what Martha could do with her share of the prize if Apollo won. $50,000 divided by 2, Miss Dotty calculated. That's $25,000 for each of us. "If he wins," Martha reminded her, "we don't know if he'll win." "He'll win," Miss Dotty said with conviction. "That duck has star quality. Even I, who knows nothing about birds, can see that." Martha smiled, allowing herself to feel hope for the first time in a long while. In the following days, a routine was established. Every morning, Martha woke up early and took care of Apollo. She fed him, changed his water, cleaned the pen. Then she took the duck to the association, where Gerald and other members taught her about specific care. She learned that the Pekin breed needed regular baths to keep their feathers white and shiny. She learned about the balanced diet that included specific grains, chopped vegetables, and vitamin supplements. She learned to examine the duck's feet for injuries or infections. Clara visited every day, checking on progress. At first, she kept a formal distance, but gradually she started to open up. She began sharing more stories about Felix, about the life they had together. "He was a difficult man," she said one afternoon. "Stubborn, closed off, but with animals, he transformed. He had infinite patience, absolute dedication. He used to say that animals don't lie, don't betray. They're pure." "He was right," Martha agreed, looking at Apollo. "This duck has been a better companion to me than my own son." The week passed quickly. Martha was surprised by how much she was learning, how much she was growing in this new role. She felt useful again. She had a purpose. Every morning she woke up with something to do, someone who depended on her. Miss Dotty also blossomed with the company. The house that had been too quiet now had conversations, laughter, plans. The two women discovered they had a lot in common, from their love for old soap operas to their preference for strong coffee in the morning. It was Walt who suggested something that would change everything. "Have you thought about turning this into something bigger?" he asked one afternoon in the square, where the elderly group still gathered. "Turning what into something bigger?" Martha asked. "This animal care thing. There are so many elderly people who are abandoned, without purpose, without anything to do, and there are so many animals needing care. Why not combine the two?" The idea stuck in Martha's mind. That night, she talked it over with Miss Dotty. "Walt is right," Miss Dotty said. "We could start small, take in 1 or 2 more animals to care for, see if it works." "But where would we get the animals?" "At the association," Miss Dotty replied. "Clara mentioned that some breeders sometimes need temporary help with their animals. We could offer that service." The idea started taking shape. Martha talked to Clara about it, who seemed interested. "There's a breeder in Nashville who's having health problems," Clara said. "He has 15 birds that need someone to take care of them temporarily. If you and Apollo do well at the show, I can recommend you." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to hit like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. The day of the show in Nashville finally arrived. Martha barely slept the night before, alternating between excitement and nervousness. What if Apollo didn't perform well? What if she did something wrong? What if all that effort was for nothing? Miss Dotty calmed her down. "You did everything right," she said. "The duck is beautiful, healthy, happy. The rest is in the hands of fate." Clara offered a ride to Nashville, and the three women left early in the morning. The show was held at a large event center, with hundreds of breeders showcasing their best animals. Martha had never seen anything like it. There were ducks of all breeds and sizes, ornamental chickens, geese, turkeys. Each animal was impeccably cared for, and the owners walked proudly with their creations. Apollo was registered in the adult male Pekin duck category. There were 12 competitors. Martha watched the other ducks, feeling a knot in her stomach. They all looked perfect. "Don't be nervous," Clara said. "Apollo has something special that the others don't. You'll see." The competition began. The judges, 3 poultry breeding experts, carefully examined each animal. They looked at posture, beak, feathers, feet, eyes. They took notes on clipboards, talking quietly among themselves. When it was Apollo's turn, Martha placed him on the table with trembling hands. The duck positioned himself perfectly, as if he knew exactly what to do. His white feathers shone under the lights, each one perfectly aligned. One of the judges, a gentleman about 60 with thick-rimmed glasses, stepped closer for a better look. "This is Felix Harrison's Apollo, isn't it?" he asked. "Yes, it is," Clara replied. "My late husband." "I remember this animal," the judge said, with respect in his voice. "It won right here 2 years ago. It's an exceptional specimen of the breed." He examined Apollo for several minutes, checking every detail. Martha could barely breathe. Finally, the judge stepped back and made his notes. The wait for the results was torturous. Martha and Ms. Dotty sat in the bleachers, while Clara stayed near the table with Apollo. The event center was packed, hundreds of people moving around, talking, trading. "Regardless of the result," Ms. Dotty said, "you've already proven a lot. 2 weeks ago you were abandoned on a road. Now you're here, caring for a champion animal, being part of something bigger." Martha nodded, feeling tears threaten to spill. Ms. Dotty was right. Winning would be amazing, but the true prize was already earned. She had found purpose again. Finally, the loudspeakers announced the results. 3rd place went to a breeder from New York, 2nd place to another from Pennsylvania, and 1st place, Apollo, owned by Clara Harrison, cared for by Martha Miller. Martha couldn't hold back the tears. She stood up and ran down the bleachers, meeting Clara, who was also crying. The 2 women hugged, united by joy and the memory of Felix. "You did it," Clara said. "You took such good care of him that he won." The prize included a blue ribbon, a certificate, and $20,000 in cash. When Clara took the check, she looked at Martha. "Half is yours," she said. "No," Martha replied, surprising everyone. "I want to propose something different." "What?" "Use all the money to start an animal care program," Martha said. "A program where abandoned or lonely seniors can learn to care for birds and other animals, finding purpose and earning a small income from it. I help coordinate, but the money goes back into the project." Clara stared at Martha for a long moment. "Felix would have loved this idea," she finally said. "Let's do it, but you'll receive a fixed salary as coordinator, and you'll have guaranteed housing." "Housing where?" "At the farm," Clara replied. "It's been empty since Felix left. It's too big for me alone. We can turn part of it into that animal care center you're proposing. You and other seniors can live there, take care of the animals, and have dignity." Martha could hardly believe what she was hearing. 2 weeks ago, she was homeless, hopeless, and without a future. Now she was not only being offered a place to live, but a chance to create something meaningful. "I accept," she said, her voice choked. "I accept with all my heart." Ms. Dotty, who had overheard everything, hugged them both. "Then I'm coming along," she announced. "You'll need help, and I've got nothing keeping me here." In the following weeks, the project took shape. Clara opened up Felix's farm for renovations. The property was spacious, with a main house of 3 bedrooms, plus 2 smaller houses used for storage. There were also the poultry houses Felix had built, all empty since the auction. Martha and Ms. Dotty moved into one of the smaller houses, renovated with the essentials. They started by cleaning the poultry houses, preparing them to receive new animals. Clara used her network of contacts in the association to get birds that needed temporary care. Walt was the first senior to join the project. Then came Lucille, then John Paul. Each one brought their own story of loneliness, abandonment, or hardship, and each found in caring for the animals a reason to keep going. "It's funny," Walt said one day while feeding a brood of ducklings. "I spent 40 years working in a factory, thinking that was what gave my life meaning, but I retired and found I had nothing. Now, taking care of these little critters, I feel useful again." The project began to gain recognition. Breeders in the area heard about the work being done and started hiring their services. They paid for the seniors at the farm to temporarily care for animals that needed special attention. Martha coordinated everything with dedication. She created a schedule system, ensuring every animal received the necessary care. She taught the other seniors everything she had learned from Gerald and Clara. She discovered she had a talent for organizing and teaching. 3 months after the exhibition in Nashville, the farm housed 15 seniors and over 100 birds. There were ducks, chickens, geese, turkeys, each receiving specialized care. The work generated enough income to pay a small but decent salary to each senior, in addition to covering the farm's expenses. Clara visited weekly, impressed by the transformation of the place. Where there had once been emptiness and silence, now there was life and purpose. "Felix would be so proud," she said during one of those visits. "He always believed that animals had healing power, healing not just illnesses, but the soul as well." It was on one of those afternoons that Martha received an unexpected visitor. She was in the main poultry house when Miss Dotty came running. "Martha, there's someone here who wants to talk to you." "Who?" "I don't know. A young man. Says he's a journalist." Martha went to the farm entrance where a young man about 30 years old was waiting with a camera and a notepad. "Good afternoon," he said with enthusiasm. "My name is Daniel Fletcher. I'm a reporter for the County Gazette. I'm working on a story about innovative social projects in the area, and I heard about your work here." "A story?" Martha repeated, surprised. "Yes. The story of elderly people caring for award-winning animals is fascinating. May I ask a few questions?" Martha Miller agreed, still somewhat dazed. Daniel Fletcher asked several questions about how the project had started, how many elderly people were involved, and what kind of animals they cared for. He took photos of the farm, of the poultry houses, of the elderly people working. "And you, Mrs. Miller?" he asked at the end. "How did all this start for you?" Martha hesitated. It would be easy to tell just the good part of the story, to skip the abandonment, the pain, the shame. But something inside her decided to be honest. "I was abandoned by my son on a roadside," she said simply. "He left me there with just a duck and a backpack. That duck was Apollo, and it was by taking care of him that I discovered a new purpose in my life." Daniel stopped writing and looked at her with renewed attention. That's an incredible story," he said. "Would you mind if I focused the article on that, on how life can change through simple acts of care?" "I don't mind," Martha replied, "but only if you promise me one thing." "What's that?" "That you'll mention all the people who helped me along the way. Tyler, who recognized me at the gas station, Walt, who gave me a ride, Miss Dotty, who opened her home, Gerald, who taught me about poultry, Clara, who trusted me. Without them, I wouldn't be here today." "I promise," said Daniel. The article came out in the newspaper a week later, taking up the entire page. The headline read, "From Abandonment to Redemption, How a Duck Transformed a Woman's Life and Created a Community of Hope." The response was immediate. People started calling, wanting to know more about the project. Some wanted to donate animals, others wanted to volunteer, and some elderly people called wanting to participate. That was also when Kevin reappeared. Martha was in the backyard, helping Walter build a new poultry house, when she saw the car stop at the entrance of the farm. She recognized the vehicle immediately. Her heart tightened, but not from hope or joy. It was simply resignation. Kevin got out of the car and walked over to her. He looked different, thinner, with deep dark circles under his eyes. It seemed time hadn't been kind to him. "Mum," he said, stopping a few feet away. "Kevin," she replied without moving closer. I saw the article in the paper. I read about everything you did. And? And I wanted to say that—" He hesitated, searching for words. "I'm so sorry." Martha looked at the son she had raised, the son who abandoned her, the son who was now apologizing. Part of her wanted to run and hug him, forgive everything, salvage some version of the relationship they had. But another part, the part that had grown over the last few months, knew that would be a mistake. "What are you sorry for, Kevin?" she asked. "For abandoning me? Or for me having managed to get by without you?" "Both," he admitted. "I was lost, Mom. I thought getting rid of you would be the solution, but it only made everything worse. And now, what do you want? For me to forgive? To let you come back into my life as if nothing had happened?" "I don't know," Kevin said honestly. "I just know that I was wrong. Very wrong." Martha took a deep breath. She looked around, at the farm she now called home, at the elderly people who had become her family, at the animals that gave her purpose. "Kevin," she said finally, "I forgive you. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. Carrying around anger and hurt only hurts me, so I choose to forgive. But that doesn't mean I'll forget, and it doesn't mean you can come back into my life like before." "Mom—" "No," she interrupted firmly. "You made your choices. I made mine. I built a new life here, a life that makes me happy. If you've truly changed, if you really want to make peace with me, you'll have to prove it over time. Not with words, but with actions." "How?" "Start by getting your own life together," Martha said. "Stop drinking. Get a real job. Learn to be responsible for yourself without depending on anyone. When you manage to do that, maybe we can talk about rebuilding some kind of relationship, but on my terms, not yours." Kevin was silent for a long moment. Martha saw tears running down his face. "I'll try," he said quietly. "I'll try to be better." "Then go," she replied, "but not for me. For yourself." Kevin nodded and went back to the car. Martha watched him drive away, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. Maybe someday they'd have a healthy relationship, or maybe not. But for the first time in her life, Martha was at peace with any outcome. Ms. Dotty approached and put her hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing," she said. "I know," Martha replied. "I know." The following months were a time of steady growth. The project at the farm got an official name, Wings of Hope. Clara registered it as a non-profit organization, allowing them to receive donations and official partnerships. A businessman in the poultry feed industry heard about the project and offered a partnership. He would provide feed at a discount in exchange for the seniors testing new products and giving feedback. It was a mutually beneficial partnership. The Breeders' Association also got more involved. They started regularly sending animals to the farm, paying for the care and expertise the seniors were developing. Martha became known in the breeder community as one of the best caretakers in the region. Apollo continued to be the star of the farm. He won 2 more exhibitions, each victory boosting the reputation of Wings of Hope. But for Martha, he was more than a champion. He was a symbol of everything she had achieved, of the entire transformation she had gone through. "Sometimes I stop and think," she said to Clara one afternoon, "that if Kevin hadn't bought that duck, none of this would have happened. In a strange way, that terrible act of his led me to the best place in my life." "Suffering has that power," Clara replied. "When we don't let it destroy us, it transforms us." It was then that Martha had an idea. She had been thinking about it for months, but never had the courage to bring it up. Now she felt the time was right. "Clara," she said, "have you ever thought about moving here?" Clara looked surprised. "To the farm?" "Yes. You come here every week, help with everything, but then go back to that big empty house in town. Why not live here? There's space, there are people, there's purpose." Clara was silent, considering it. Ever since Felix had passed away, the house in town really did feel too big, too empty, too lonely. "You know what?" she finally said. "I'll accept, but on one condition." "What's that?" "That we turn the main house into a community space, a place where all the seniors in the project can gather, have meals together, do group activities." That way the farm becomes a real community, not just a workplace. Martha loved the idea. And that's exactly what they did. The main house was renovated and became the heart of Wings of Hope. It had a large kitchen where they made community meals, a big room for meetings and activities, and a space that Clara turned into a small library with books Felix had collected. The community grew to 25 seniors. Each had their own story of pain, but they all shared the same journey of a fresh start. There were former teachers like Martha, former factory workers like Walt, homemakers like Lucille, retired shopkeepers like John Paul, all united by their care for the animals. Gerald, who had never lived on the farm, began spending more and more time there. Eventually he moved in too, bringing his expertise in poultry breeding. He became the project's lead instructor, teaching the new members. The afternoons at the square in Asheville kept happening, but now they were different. The seniors from Wings of Hope went there once a week to tell their stories, inviting other lonely seniors to check out the project. Many ended up joining. It was on one of those afternoons that Martha ran into Tyler, the gas station attendant who had helped her on the first day. "Mrs. Miller," he exclaimed happily. "It's so good to see you. I read about the project in the paper." "Tyler!" Martha hugged him like a son. "How are you?" "Good, still working at the gas station. But I'm happy to see you managed to turn things around." "I wouldn't have done it without your help that day," Martha said sincerely. "You were the first person to treat me with compassion when I needed it most." They talked for a while, and Martha found out that Tyler was studying at night to get into vet school. He dreamed of working with animals, but life hadn't given him many chances for that. "Why don't you come intern with us?" Martha offered. "We can't pay much, but you can learn a lot about poultry care, and it'd be good experience for your resume." Tyler accepted right away. He started spending weekends at the farm, helping with the animals and learning from Gerald. His excitement and dedication were contagious. 1 year after the day she was abandoned on the road, Martha was sitting on the porch of the main house, watching the farm's activity. It was a sunny Sunday, and the seniors were spread out through the poultry houses, tending to the animals. She could hear laughter, conversations, the quacking of ducks and the clucking of chickens. Apollo was beside her, lying calmly. The duck never strayed far from her, as if he knew they were bound by a shared fate. Clara came out of the house carrying 2 cups of coffee. "What are you thinking about, Jan?" she asked, sitting next to Martha. "About how strange life is," Martha replied. "A year ago I was at rock bottom. I thought I had lost everything, and in a way I had, but it was in that loss that I found everything that really matters." "And what's that?" "Purpose," said Martha. "Community. Feeling like your existence makes a difference, not to the whole world, but to a few people and animals who depend on you." Clara nodded. "Felix used to say that happiness doesn't come from having a lot, but from being useful. I think you've figured that out." "It only took me 75 years to learn," Martha joked. They laughed together, 2 women life had hurt, but who chose to heal through caring for others. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us beginners. Now, continuing. It was in October of that year that an opportunity came along that would change everything again. Daniel, the journalist who had written the first article about Wings of Hope, came back to the farm. "I have a proposal for you," he said, barely containing his excitement. "A TV network wants to do a special report on the project. It would be broadcast across the whole state." Martha felt uneasy. "TV? I don't know if we're ready for that much exposure." "You are," Daniel insisted. "Your story can inspire other communities to start similar projects. It could change the lives of hundreds of seniors out there who don't know what to do." Clara agreed. "He's right, Martha. It's not about us. It's about showing that it's possible to start over, that age isn't a limitation." After a lot of discussion with all the seniors at the farm, they decided to accept. The report was filmed over the course of a week, showing the daily life at Wings of Hope. They interviewed Martha, Clara, Miss Dottie, Gerald, Walt, and several others. When the report aired, the response exceeded all expectations. The farm's phone wouldn't stop ringing. People wanted to donate money, animals, land. Elderly folks from other towns called asking if they could join the project. Breeders from all over the state wanted to send their animals to be cared for. But the call that impacted Martha the most came 3 days after the report. It was from a social worker in New York City. "Mrs. Miller, my name is Patricia Sterling. I work with a municipal senior shelter here in the city. I saw the report and was deeply moved. I was wondering if it would be possible to replicate this model here." Martha was surprised. "Replicate it how?" "We have a piece of land available donated by a businessman, and we have many elderly people living in poor conditions, without purpose. If you could come here, guide us on how to start a similar project, that would be incredible." Martha talked to Clara about it. "That's a lot of responsibility," she said. "I don't know if I can do it." "You can," Clara said, "and you won't be alone. We'll go together. We can do this once a month. Go to New York City, give advice, teach what we've learned." And that was how the second phase of Wings of Hope began. Martha, Clara, and Gerald started traveling monthly to New York City, helping to establish a sister project in the big city. They taught everything: how to structure the poultry houses, how to train the elderly, how to form partnerships with breeders, how to generate income. The New York City project took 6 months to take off, but when it did, it was spectacular. 20 elderly people were taken from overcrowded shelters and brought to the new center, where they began caring for birds donated by breeders from the metropolitan area. The success in New York City inspired other cities. Nashville wanted its own Wings of Hope. Then it was Campinas, then Santos. Within 2 years, there were 7 centers spread across the state, all following the model created by Martha and Clara. Martha found herself traveling constantly, giving lectures, guiding new coordinators, sharing her story. She never imagined that at 77 years old she would be so active, so busy, so fulfilled. But even with all the growth and recognition, it was at the original farm in Asheville that her heart felt at home. That was where Apollo stayed, now 8 years old and officially retired from exhibitions. That was where Ms. Dottie, Gerald, Walt, and all the others who were part of her chosen family lived. One night, after returning from a particularly tiring trip to Campinas, Martha sat on the porch as usual. Ms. Dottie brought hot tea and sat beside her. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she observed. "You need to rest more." "I know," Martha admitted, "but how can I stop when so many people need help?" "You can't save everyone," Ms. Dottie said gently. "You've already done more than anyone could expect. Maybe it's time to train others to carry on the work." Martha knew her friend was right. In the following months, she began to delegate more. She identified natural leaders in each of the Wings of Hope centers and trained them to be self-sufficient. She created a manual with everything she had learned, a complete guide for anyone wanting to start similar projects. It was liberating to realize that the work no longer depended solely on her, that she had created something bigger than herself, something that would continue to exist even if she stopped. It was around this time that Kevin showed up again. Nearly 2 years had passed since their last meeting. Martha was in the poultry house when Ms. Dottie came to tell her. "Your son is here," she said. "He looks different." Martha found Kevin waiting at the farm entrance, and Ms. Dottie was right, he looked different. He was cleaner, in well-kept clothes, his eyes clear and focused. There was no smell of alcohol that always accompanied him. "Hi, Mom," he said, without getting too close. "Kevin," she greeted, keeping her tone neutral, "I wanted you to know I'm getting treatment. I stopped drinking 1 year and 2 months ago. I've been going to a support group." "That's good," said Martha, and she meant it. Despite everything, he was still her son. "And I got a job," he went on. "I'm working as a salesman at a hardware store. It's not a big deal, but it's honest. I pay my own bills now." "I'm proud of you," said Martha, and she realized it was true. "I didn't come here to ask to be back in your life," Kevin clarified. "I know I broke your trust in a way that maybe can't be fixed. I just came to say I'm trying to be a better person, and to thank you. Thank me for not giving up on yourself when I gave up on you," he said, his voice breaking. "For showing that it's possible to start over, no matter your age or circumstances. You're the strongest person I know, Mom." The words touched something deep in Martha. She stepped forward and hugged her son. It wasn't a hug of full reconciliation, but it was a start. "Keep taking care of yourself," she said. "And when you feel ready, if you want to be part of my life for real, the door is open. But it'll have to be on my terms, with respect and healthy boundaries." "I understand," said Kevin, "and I'll keep trying to earn that." He left, and Martha went back to the poultry sheds with a lighter heart. She didn't know if she'd ever have a truly healthy relationship with her son, but at least now there was hope, and hope was something she had learned to value. 3 years after the day she was abandoned on the road, Martha woke up on her 78th birthday to a surprise. The farm was decorated with colourful streamers, and all the seniors in the community had prepared a party. "Happy birthday," everyone shouted when she came out of the house. There was cake, snacks, soda. More importantly, there was love. People who cared, who celebrated her existence. Clara gave an emotional speech. 3 years ago, Martha arrived here with nothing but a duck and hope. Today, she's transformed not only her own life, but the lives of hundreds of people. The 7 Wings of Hope centers house 150 seniors. 1,200 birds are cared for with dedication, all because one woman decided her end wouldn't be on a dusty road, but in a place of purpose and love. Everyone applauded. Martha, with tears in her eyes, looked around at the people who had become her family. Miss Dotty, always by her side, Gerald, with his knowledge of birds, Walter, John Paul, Lucille, Tyler, who was now in college but still helped on weekends, Clara, who had gone from being a partner to being a sister at heart, and of course Apollo, sleeping peacefully at her feet. "I didn't do this alone," said Martha when it was her turn to speak. "Every person here contributed. And I want you all to know that I've found more family in these 3 years than I had in my entire previous life. You saved me just as much as I saved you." The party went on until late. There was music, dancing, shared stories. It was a celebration not just of a birthday, but of survival, resilience, and rebirth. That night, lying in her bed in the house she now called home, Martha thought about everything she had lived through. She thought about Arthur, who left decades ago. She thought about Kevin and the pain of abandonment. She thought about the red dirt road where she thought her story would end. But she also thought about everything she had gained, about purpose found, about deep friendships, about lives transformed, including her own. The soft sound of the ducks in the shed lulled her to sleep, and for the first time in her life, Martha Miller fell asleep completely at peace, knowing that her existence had meaning, that her pains were not in vain, and that the years still ahead would be lived with purpose and love. The following months brought new challenges and victories. One of the centers in New York City faced financial difficulties, but with help from all the other centers and a donation campaign, they managed to recover. A businessman offered a partnership to export eggs from some special breeds being raised, generating extra income for the centers. Martha also made an important decision. She started writing a book. She wanted to document her journey, not out of vanity, but so that other people in similar situations would know that starting over was possible at any age. "I'm going to call it The Duck That Changed My Life," she said to Clara. "Perfect," Clara agreed. "But don't forget to tell about all of us, too. This story isn't just yours, it's from an entire community." And that's exactly what Martha did. She spent months writing, recalling every detail, every emotion, every person who touched her life. Miss Dotty helped with typing, since Martha had never been good with computers. Gerald contributed with technical information about poultry raising. Clara proofread, adding memories about Felix that gave context to the story. When the book was ready, they didn't try to publish it through big publishers. Instead, they made a simple independent edition and sold it at the Wings of Hope centers themselves. The money raised went straight to the project. The impact was surprising. People from all over the United States started ordering copies. Schools bought it to use as support material in discussions about active aging. Town governments used it as inspiration to create public policies for the elderly. Martha received hundreds of letters from people thanking her for sharing her story. Many were from elderly women who felt invisible and found hope in the pages of the book. One letter in particular deeply moved her. It was from an 82-year-old woman from Newark who had been abandoned by her family in a nursing home. She wrote, "Mrs. Miller, your story made me realize that my life isn't over just because my children don't want me anymore. I started taking care of plants at the nursing home, and now I teach the other ladies. It's not much, but it's my purpose. Thank you for showing me it's never too late to start over." Martha kept that letter in a special drawer and reread it whenever she felt the weight of age or tiredness. It was on an ordinary workday 4 years after the abandonment that Martha realized something amazing. She was teaching a new group of seniors about proper feeding for ducklings when it hit her. She was completely happy. It wasn't an euphoric or dramatic happiness. It was a calm, deep, sustainable happiness. The happiness of knowing your place in the world, of waking up with purpose, of going to bed satisfied with the day lived. That night, she shared this realization with Ms. Doty. "You know, I spent my whole life looking for happiness in the wrong people," she said. "In the husband who left, in the son who abandoned me. I thought I needed them to be complete." "And now?" asked Ms. Doty. "Now I know that true happiness comes from purpose, from being useful, from making a difference, and from being surrounded by people who choose to be with you, not out of obligation, but out of genuine love." "That's wisdom only pain can teach," observed Ms. Doty. "True," Martha agreed. "And if I could go back in time, I'm not sure I'd change my path. The pain brought me here, and here is where I want to be." The following 5 years were about consolidating the project. New Wings of Hope centers appeared in other states: Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Colorado. Each one adapted the model to their local reality, but kept the essence: seniors caring for animals and finding purpose. Martha visited each center at least once a year, always accompanied by Lucille or Gerald. She liked seeing the different ways the project manifested in each place. In Rio, they focused more on ornamental chickens. In Pennsylvania, they raised geese. In Denver, they had a partnership with a university for animal welfare research. It was on one of those trips to Denver that Martha met Beatrice, an 83-year-old woman who coordinated the center there. Beatrice had a similar story. Abandoned by her family, she found a new reason to live in caring for animals. The two talked for hours, sharing experiences, pains, victories. It was comforting to find someone who completely understood what it meant to be reborn in old age. "Sometimes I think," said Beatrice, "that our generation was raised to serve others. Husbands, children, grandchildren. We never learned to live for ourselves. And when others discard us, we're lost because we don't know who we are without them." "But now we know," Martha replied. "We know we're strong, capable, valuable, whether or not anyone recognizes it." "Exactly," Beatrice agreed. When Martha turned 82, she decided to step back from the active management of Wings of Hope. She wasn't stopping completely, but she recognized she needed to make room for new leadership. Tyler, who had already graduated in veterinary medicine, took over as technical coordinator of all the centers. Lucille continued as administrative director, and Ms. Doty became responsible for welcoming new seniors, using her own experience of abandonment to help others. Martha became something of an advisor, a symbolic figure who visited the centers, talked to the seniors, shared accumulated wisdom. It was in this calmer new phase that Kevin started visiting more often. He had stayed sober for 6 years, was in a healthy relationship, and genuinely seemed like a transformed person. "Can I help in some way with the project?" he asked during one visit. "I'm not asking for money or a position. I just want to contribute, give back a little of everything you've done." Martha thought about it. "We've needed help with transportation," she said finally. "Delivering feed, transporting animals between the centers, things like that. If you could do that on your days off, it would be useful." Kevin accepted, and little by little, mother and son began to rebuild a relationship. It would never be what Martha dreamed of when he was a child, but it was honest, based on actions and not just words. On one of those transport trips, Kevin asked, "Mom, have you really forgiven me?" Martha thought before answering, Yes and no, she said honestly. I've forgiven in the sense that I don't hold on to anger anymore. I don't dwell on what you did. But I haven't forgotten, and there's still a scar. I think some things you forgive, but never fully forget. That's fair, said Kevin. I didn't expect you to forget. I just hope to keep proving I've changed. Keep it up, said Martha. That's all I can ask. Apollo passed away when he was 12, an advanced age for his breed. It was peaceful during sleep, surrounded by Martha and all the others. They held a small ceremony on the property, burying him under a tree that Lucille planted in memory of Felix. That duck saved so many lives, said Lucille during the ceremony, including mine. Felix would be happy knowing Apollo carried on his legacy of care and love. Martha cried, but they were tears of gratitude more than sadness. Apollo had lived a good life, had fulfilled a purpose that went beyond any exhibition or award. They took one of Apollo's white feathers and framed it together with the first blue ribbon he won under Martha Miller's care. They placed it in the community room of the farm, where everyone could see and remember where it all began. The following years were kind to Martha. Her health remained reasonably good, allowing her to stay active in the project. At 85, she still gave lectures, still visited the centers, still taught new seniors about the transformative power of care. The Wings of Hope project had grown to 15 centers in 6 states, housing over 400 seniors. Thousands of animals were cared for with dedication, and more importantly, hundreds of lives had found purpose and dignity. Martha sometimes received invitations to give interviews or participate in documentaries. She usually declined, preferring to keep things simple. But when a television program offered to do a special on the 10-year anniversary of Wings of Hope, she agreed on one condition, that they show stories of many seniors, not just hers. The special was moving. They showed Walt, now 86, still actively caring for birds. They showed Ms. Dottie and how she had become a surrogate mother to dozens of abandoned seniors. They showed Tyler and how the project had inspired his career. They showed Clara and how she turned the pain of loss into a legacy of life. And of course, they showed Martha. But not as a solitary heroine, rather as part of a web of people who helped each other. No one saves themselves alone, she said in the interview. I didn't save these people. We saved each other. Each one contributing with what they had, creating something greater than any of us individually. After the special aired, Martha received one more surprise. The City Hall of Asheville decided to honor her by naming a street after her. Professor Martha Miller Street, founder of Wings of Hope. At the plaque unveiling, the mayor gave a speech about how Martha had put the city on the map through her social work. Martha listened politely, but when it was her turn to speak, she deviated from the script. This tribute is nice, she said, but I don't care about a street with my name. What I care about is that every elderly woman in this city has a dignified place to live. What I care about is that no senior is abandoned with nowhere to go. That would be a real tribute. Her words caused discomfort among some politicians present, but warm applause from the crowd. And in the following months, the City Hall indeed created new policies for seniors, inspired by Martha's speech. It was on an ordinary day when Martha was 87 that she had a deep conversation with Clara about the future. Have you ever thought about what will happen to Wings of Hope when we're no longer here? Clara asked. I have, replied Martha, and I think it's well on its way. Tyler is young and competent. We have strong coordinators at each center. The project no longer depends on us. But it needs a soul, said Clara. It needs people who understand that it's not just about caring for animals, but about giving dignity to human beings. Then let's make sure that soul is passed on, Martha decided. Let's create a mentorship program where the project's senior members teach the newer ones not only techniques but philosophy, the why of what we do. And that's what they created. The Felix Harrison Mentorship Program, named after the man whose duck had started it all. Experienced seniors in the project began dedicating time to teach newcomers, not just about feeding birds or cleaning poultry houses, but about empathy, resilience, community. Martha and Clara became the first mentors, sharing their stories repeatedly, ensuring every new member understood the founding values of Wings of Hope. Kevin remained present, helping with transportation and maintenance. He never asked for special recognition, never tried to profit from his mother's fame. He just worked quietly, proving through actions that he had changed. On one of those transport trips, Martha asked, "Are you happy now, Kevin?" He thought before answering. "Not the way I imagined I'd be happy when I was young," he said honestly. "I don't have money or success, but I have peace. I have an honest job, a healthy relationship, and I'm slowly building a relationship with my mother. I think that's more than I deserved after everything I did." "Everyone deserves a second chance," said Martha. "Some just take longer to take it." When Martha turned 90, the celebration was huge. Representatives from all 15 centers came to Asheville. There were over 200 people at the farm, including project seniors, volunteers, partners, and officials. Tyler organized a special surprise, a new chicken coop, the most modern and beautiful of all, which would be named the Apollo Coop, in honor of the duck that started it all. "Mrs. Martha," Tyler said during the inauguration, "you saved me when I was just a gas station attendant with no prospects. You gave me an opportunity, believed in me, taught me that compassion can change the world. Today, I'm a veterinarian, and I coordinate a project that helps hundreds of people, all because you treated me with kindness at a gas station 10 years ago." Martha hugged Tyler, feeling the pride of a mother. In a way, she had gained many children along that journey. Children of the heart who chose to be with her, who returned love with love. That night, sitting on the porch with Ms. Dottie, as so many times before, Martha reflected on life. "Do you regret anything?" asked Ms. Dottie. "I regret wasting so much time trying to please people who didn't value me," Martha replied. "But I don't regret the path I took because it brought me here." "Do you think everything happened for a reason?" asked Ms. Dottie. "I don't know if I believe in divine reason or fate," said Martha thoughtfully. "But I believe we can create reason from what happens to us. Kevin abandoning me could have been just a tragedy, but I turned it into an opportunity. The duck could have been just an animal, but it became a symbol of new beginnings. I think we have more power to create meaning than we imagine." Martha's final years were a natural slowing down. At 92, she no longer traveled as much, but she received constant visits from seniors from all centers who wanted to meet the founder of the movement that changed their lives. Clara, now 83, still worked actively, but also felt the weight of age. Together, they planned a full succession, ensuring the project would remain strong even without them. It was on a quiet autumn afternoon, when Martha was 94, that she received an unexpected visit. It was a young woman, maybe around 30, accompanied by a girl of about 8. "Mrs. Martha," said the woman shyly. "My name is Julie. I'm Tyler's granddaughter. He always talks about you, about how you changed his life. I wanted my daughter to meet you." Martha was moved. She invited them in, offered juice and cookies. The girl, named Lauren, had curious eyes and asked questions about everything. "Is it true you were abandoned on a road?" Lauren asked with the frankness typical of children. "Lauren," Julie scolded, embarrassed. "It's okay," said Martha, smiling. "Yes, it's true. I was abandoned on a road with a white duck." "And were you sad?" "Very sad," Martha admitted. "It was one of the worst days of my life." "But did you get better?" Lauren asked. "I did, because I realized that sometimes the worst things that happen to us open doors to the best things we could never have imagined." "My grandpa Tyler says you're a hero," Lauren said. "Your grandfather is the real hero," Martha corrected. "He helped me when I needed it most, without even knowing me. That's what makes a true hero." Julie explained that she was teaching her daughter about empathy and kindness and wanted to use Martha's story as an example. They talked for hours, and when they left, Lauren hugged Martha tightly. "When I grow up," the girl said, "I want to help people the way you do." That hug, those simple words from a child, reminded Martha why everything was worth it. It wasn't just about the elderly she helped directly. It was about the example she set, the seeds she planted in young hearts that would carry the message forward. That night, Martha wrote in her journal something she did every night since starting the project. "Today I had a visit from Lauren, an 8-year-old girl who wants to grow up to help others. It made me realize that the real legacy isn't in the structures we build, but in the people we inspire. If Lauren grows up and helps even just one person, it will have been worth every tear I shed on that road 10 years ago. The following months brought significant changes. Selina was diagnosed with a heart condition that required surgery. Martha stayed by her side throughout the process, returning the support Selina had given her years before. "I'm scared," Selina confessed the night before the surgery. "I know," Martha said, holding her hand. "But you'll be fine. There are so many people rooting for you, so much still to do." "What if I don't make it?" "Then you'll know your life had meaning," Martha answered. "That you honored Felix's memory in the best way possible. That you turned pain into purpose. Not everyone can say that. The surgery was successful, but the recovery was slow." During the 3 months Selina was away, Martha took on more responsibilities again, even at 94. Her body complained, her joints ached, but her spirit was strong. It was during this time that a new challenge arose. One of the centers in New York City was being pressured by the city council to close due to bureaucratic issues related to permits. The local coordinator, a woman named Rosa, called desperately, "Mrs. Martha, I don't know what to do. They say we need special licenses, that the property isn't properly zoned. If we close, 23 elderly people will have nowhere to go." Martha discussed this with Felipe. Together they discovered that the problem was actually a local councilman who wanted the property for another purpose and was using bureaucracy as an excuse. "We'll need to apply public pressure," Felipe said. "Show the work being done there, get the community mobilized." And that's exactly what they did. Martha, despite her advanced age, traveled to New York City. She gave interviews, spoke at public hearings, mobilized the press. The story gained national attention, a 94-year-old woman fighting to save a project that helped abandoned seniors. The public pressure worked. The councilman backed down, the permits were granted, the center was saved. But the effort took its toll. Martha returned to Asheville exhausted, more fragile than ever. "You pushed yourself too hard," Ms. Dottie scolded gently. "You need to rest." "I'll rest when I'm sure everything is safe," Martha replied stubbornly. But her body had other plans. 2 weeks later, Martha fell and fractured her hip. Surgery was necessary, and the recovery would be long. For the first time in 10 years, Martha found herself completely dependent on others. It was a difficult time. Martha, who had always been the caretaker, now needed to be cared for. Ms. Dottie took on the primary care duties, but everyone at the farm pitched in. Walt came to read to her every afternoon. Gerald brought news about the animals. Tyler visited weekly to check on her recovery. And to Martha's surprise, Kevin showed up and stayed for 2 weeks, helping with whatever was needed. He cooked, cleaned, and helped his mother move around for physical therapy. "You don't have to do this," Martha said one day. "I know," Kevin replied, "but I want to. You were always there when I fell, several times, even when I didn't deserve it. Now it's my turn." That simple gesture healed more than just Martha's hip. It also healed part of the wound that abandonment had left. It didn't erase the past, but it showed that people really can change. The recovery took 4 months. When Martha finally managed to walk again, even if with the help of a cane, she made an important discovery. The world had kept turning without her. The centers were running well. Tyler and his team of coordinators were managing everything competently. New seniors arrived, animals were cared for, lives were transformed. Wings of Hope no longer depended on her to exist. "You know what this means?" asked Clara, already recovered from her surgery. "It means we did it. We created something sustainable, something that will continue after we're gone." "It's liberating," Martha admitted, "and a little scary. I spent 10 years being essential. Now I'm optional." "You'll never be optional," Ms. Dottie corrected. "You're the soul of the project, but a soul doesn't have to do everything, it just has to inspire." And Martha accepted that. In the following months, she took on a more symbolic role. She received visitors, shared stories, and gave advice when asked. But she left the active management to others. It was in this new, calmer phase that she began to receive letters from people around the world. The story of Wings of Hope had spread through the internet, and people from other countries wanted to know how to replicate the model. There were letters from Mexico, Portugal, Argentina, and even Japan, all of them asking for details on how to start similar projects in their countries. Tyler suggested creating a website with detailed information, an online manual that anyone could access. Martha loved the idea, and they spent months compiling everything: animal care techniques, management structures, ways to raise funds, strategies for dealing with local authorities. The website was launched in 6 languages and became a global reference. Within 2 years, projects inspired by Wings of Hope had sprung up in 15 different countries. "I never imagined that something that started on a dusty road in the Midwest countryside would go this far," Martha said when she received an email from an organization in Vietnam thanking her for the inspiration. Clara, always pragmatic, replied, "Good ideas have no borders, and the idea that every human being deserves dignity, especially in old age, is universal." When Martha turned 96, an international publisher reached out wanting to publish her book in English, Spanish, and French. She agreed, but with one condition: all profits would go to an international fund supporting projects similar to Wings of Hope. The book became an unexpected success, not because it was written in a sophisticated way or had dramatic twists, but because it was genuine. It was the true story of an ordinary woman who turned tragedy into purpose. Martha began receiving invitations to international events, but she turned most of them down. At 96, she no longer had the energy for long trips, but she agreed to give a video conference talk for a conference on active aging in Switzerland. "The secret to aging well," she said in her talk, "isn't having a lot of money or perfect health. It's having a purpose. It's waking up every day knowing that you matter, that your existence makes a difference, even if it's a small one. It could be taking care of an animal, watering a plant, teaching something to someone. But you need a purpose." The words resonated. The video of her talk went viral, being seen by millions of people. Martha became, without meaning to, a kind of symbol for active and meaningful aging. But she remained true to her essence. She kept living on the farm, kept waking up early to check on the poultry houses, even though she could no longer actively care for the animals, kept being simply Martha. It was on a peaceful spring morning, when Martha was 97 years old, that Miss Dottie entered her room with a strange expression. "Martha, there's a woman here who wants to talk to you. She says well, you'd better come see." Martha went to the living room, leaning on her cane. There stood a woman around 50, with features that seemed vaguely familiar. "Mrs. Miller," said the woman, visibly nervous, "my name is Patricia. I'm Kevin's daughter, your granddaughter." The world stopped for Martha. Kevin had never mentioned having a daughter. In fact, she didn't even know he had been involved with anyone before his current relationship. "My granddaughter," she repeated, incredulous. "Yes. My mum and Kevin dated when I was a baby. They split up and my mum raised me on her own. I never really knew my father. But recently I saw the article about you on the internet and recognized his name. I decided to reach out." "Does Kevin know you exist?" Martha asked. "He does. My mum tried to contact him a few times when I was a kid, but he never wanted any contact. So she gave up." Martha felt a wave of disappointment in her son, but also curiosity about the woman in front of her. "And why did you come to me?" "Because," Patricia hesitated, "because I'm going through a tough time. My marriage ended, I lost my job, and I'm feeling lost. When I read about your story, about how you started over at 75, I thought maybe you could give me some advice. I know it's strange, showing up out of the blue like this." "Sit down," Martha interrupted, pointing to the couch. "Let's talk." They spent hours talking. Patricia told her about her life, about the challenges she was facing, about the fear of being too old to start over at 50. 50 years old, Martha repeated with a smile. "Honey, you're practically still a child. I started all this at 75. You have plenty of time." "But I don't even know where to start," Patricia confessed. "Start small," Martha advised. "One thing at a time. And look for something that gives you purpose, not just money. Money comes and goes, purpose sustains you." Patricia came back several times in the following weeks, and Martha found herself welcoming this granddaughter she had never known, just as she had welcomed so many others over the years. It was Martha who finally convinced Patricia to talk to Kevin. She arranged a meeting at the farm, mediated the difficult initial conversation between father and daughter, who barely knew each other. "Why did you never reach out to me?" Patricia asked Kevin, tears streaming down her face. "Because I was a coward," he answered honestly. "I spent most of my life running away from responsibilities. I abandoned you when you were a baby. I abandoned my mother when she needed me. I was a terrible human being for a long time. And now? Now I'm trying to be better. But I know I can't get back the lost time. I can only try to do things differently from here on out." It wasn't an instant happy ending. Father and daughter had decades of hurt and absence to process, but they started therapy together, started building some kind of relationship. And Martha, watching it all, felt a deep gratitude. That abandonment on the highway, as painful as it had been, had set off a chain of events that not only transformed her life, but was transforming several generations. In the following months, Patricia got involved with Wings of Hope, helping with communication and social media. She brought a fresh, more modern perspective that helped the project reach younger people. "You know, Grandma," she said one day, and Martha felt her heart warm at being called that, "I think everything that happened in your life, no matter how bad it was, had a bigger purpose." "I don't know if it had a purpose," Martha replied, "but I created a purpose out of what happened. I think that's the difference." It was around this time that Martha began to feel her time was drawing near. It wasn't anything specific, just a deep sense of a cycle coming full circle. She talked about it with Ms. Dotty one night on the porch. "I'm not afraid," she said. "I've lived far longer than I ever thought I would when I was on that road. I've done far more than I ever dreamed possible. If it's my time, I'm at peace." "Don't say that," Ms. Dotty pleaded, tears in her eyes. "We still need you." "No, you don't," Martha replied gently. "And that's the best thing that could happen. It means I did my job right. I created something that doesn't depend on me to exist." But Martha didn't pass away that year, or the next. She kept on living, slower, quieter, but still present. At 98, she rarely left the house, but she received constant visitors. One day she got a letter that moved her deeply. It was from a 70-year-old woman in Spain who had read her book and started a similar project in Barcelona. "Dear Martha," the letter said in translated Portuguese, "I have never met you in person, but you changed my life. I was about to give up on everything when I read your story. Now I coordinate a center that helps 15 elderly people and 30 animals. Every day I thank you for having the courage to start over. Your courage gave me courage." Martha asked Patricia to reply to the letter on her behalf. She wanted the Spanish woman to know that her message had been received and appreciated. It was in this final phase of her life that Martha began recording videos of her memories and advice. Tyler suggested it as a way to preserve her wisdom for future generations. "I want you to know," she said in one of those videos, "that I'm not special. I'm just an ordinary woman who made choices. When I was abandoned, I could have chosen to give in to despair, but I chose to keep trying. When I found the duck, I could have sold him for the money, but I chose to take care of him. When I got a place to stay, I could have settled in, but I chose to help others. You can make choices too, and those choices determine who you become." The videos were compiled into an online archive that became study material in universities, in courses on gerontology, in social assistance programs. Martha became a symbol not of perfection, but of possible resilience, of how ordinary lives can have extraordinary impacts through conscious and consistent choices. At 99, Martha had a vivid dream. She was back on that red dirt road, but this time she wasn't alone. There were hundreds of people with her, all holding animals, all smiling. And in the middle of them all was Apollo, the white duck who started it all. She woke up with tears in her eyes and a feeling of completeness she had never experienced before. "What is it?" asked Ms. Dotty, who slept in the next room and heard the commotion. "I dreamed about Apollo," Martha said, "and about all the people we helped. It was beautiful." "Ms." Dotty sat on the edge of the bed and held her friend's hand. "You know you've done something incredible, right?" she said. You changed not just your life, but hundreds of others. We changed them, Martha corrected. I didn't do it alone. But you started it, Ms. Dotty insisted. When you had every reason to give up, you chose to start. That made all the difference. On the day Martha turned 100, the celebration was nationwide. The President of the United States sent a congratulatory letter. Governors from several states made speeches. But the celebration that really mattered was the one that took place at the farm. Representatives came from all the Wings of Hope centers across the country, and a few from abroad. Elderly people who had been helped by the project came. Family, friends, and partners came. Journalists, academics, and politicians came. But Martha asked for one specific thing, that the party be simple, like the ones they used to have at the beginning, with the elderly from the farm sitting in a circle, sharing stories. And that's exactly how it was. 100 chairs in a circle in the main garden of the farm. Martha at the center, frail but present, listening to each person share how Wings of Hope had impacted their lives. Walter, now 96, spoke about how he found a family at the farm after spending years completely alone. John Paul told how taking care of chickens helped him overcome the deep depression that had plagued him since retirement. Lucille shared how, for the first time in her life, she felt useful and valued at 84. Tyler talked about how a simple act of Martha recognizing him at a gas station changed the entire course of his life. Clara, 89 and still strong, recalled the day Martha proposed taking care of Apollo and how that decision honored Felix's memory in a way she never imagined. Kevin, visibly emotional, apologized publicly for the 100th time and thanked his mother for not giving up on him even when he didn't deserve a second chance. Patricia spoke about how finding her grandmother at 50 gave her hope when she was at rock bottom, and Ms. Dotty, the last to speak, could barely finish through her tears. Martha didn't just save my life. She taught me that family isn't the ones who abandon you, but the ones who choose to stay. And here, she pointed at everyone around, is the greatest family anyone could ever wish for. When everyone finished speaking, Martha asked for help to stand up. With Ms. Dotty on one side and Clara on the other, she got to her feet and looked around the circle. When I was 75, she began, her voice weak but steady, I thought my life was over, that I had nothing left to live for. But I was wrong. The last 25 years have been the best of my life, not because they were easy, they weren't, but because they were full of purpose, of love, of community. I learned that it's never too late to start over. It's never too late to choose to be useful. It's never too late to create a family where there's no blood, only heart. She paused, breathing heavily. If I could go back to that road and change what happened, I don't know if I would. Because everything that came after, everything we built together, was worth every tear shed. Thank you. Thank you to each of you for being part of this incredible journey. Everyone stood up and applauded. Martha sat back down, exhausted but deeply happy. She looked around and saw not just faces but stories. Each person there represented a journey of pain transformed into purpose. That night, after everyone had left, Martha was in her room when Kevin knocked on the door. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Of course." Kevin sat on the edge of the bed, seeming to search for words. "I know I've apologized 1,000 times," he finally said, "but today, seeing everything you've built, all the lives you've touched, it gave me a sense of how much I almost destroyed. Not only your life, but all these other lives that have been impacted through you." "Martha, let me finish," he asked. "I want you to know I'm grateful. Grateful that you didn't give up on yourself on that highway. Grateful that you gave me second chances I didn't deserve. And grateful that you showed me, through your example, that people can change. I changed because of you." "You changed because of yourself," Martha corrected. "I just never stopped believing you could." Father and son embraced, and in that embrace lay the final forgiveness, the healing of old wounds, the acceptance that the past cannot be changed, but the present can be lived with honesty. The following months were a gradual decline. Martha slept more and more, ate less and less. Her 100-year-old body was finally surrendering. But her mind remained clear. Her eyes still sparkled when she had visitors. On a particularly beautiful autumn day, Martha asked to be taken to the Apollo aviary. She wanted to see the ducks one last time. They sat her in a comfortable chair, and she watched the animals for hours, smiling peacefully. "Thank you," she whispered, and Miss Dotty, who was beside her, didn't know if she was speaking to the ducks, to life, or to something greater. That night Martha called Miss Dotty, Clara, Tyler, Kevin and Patricia to her room. "I want you to know," she said, "that I'm ready. I lived fully. I loved deeply. I made a difference. I have no regrets. When my time comes, I don't want tears. I want celebration. Celebration of a life that could have ended on a highway but turned into something so much more." "Don't talk like that," Clara asked with tears. "I need to," Martha insisted. "And I need you to promise to continue the work. Not for me, but for everyone who will still need it." They all promised, knowing it was impossible to refuse that request. Martha Miller lived another 6 months. She passed away peacefully in her sleep on a spring morning at 101 years old. She was in her bed at the farm she helped create, surrounded by the people she loved. The funeral was as she asked, a celebration. More than 1,000 people attended, from various parts of the country and the world, people whose lives had been touched directly or indirectly by Martha. Instead of sad speeches, people shared joyful stories, memories of how Martha had inspired or helped them. There was music, laughter mixed with tears, and an overall feeling that the world was a better place because Martha Miller had passed through it. They buried her on the farm, under the same tree where Apollo was buried. The headstone was simple. Martha Miller, 1923-2024. Teacher, caregiver, inspiration. Proved it's never too late to start over. Founder of Wings of Hope. In the months following Martha's passing, the Wings of Hope project not only continued, but flourished even more. As if her life had planted seeds that were now sprouting with full force. Clara officially took over as president of the organization, a role she held until she was 92, when she retired and passed the baton to Tyler. Miss Dotty lived until she was 98, always at the farm, always caring for the new elders who arrived, always telling the story of how she met Martha. Kevin continued working as a volunteer on the project until he was 70. His relationship with Patricia blossomed, and he finally met his grandchildren, Martha's great-grandchildren who never knew her personally, but grew up hearing stories about her. Wings of Hope grew to more than 50 centers in 12 countries. Over 2,000 elders found purpose and dignity caring for animals. Tens of thousands of birds were cared for, with love and dedication. But beyond the numbers, Martha's true legacy was in the individual stories. In every elder who arrived, lost, and found meaning. In every animal that received loving care. In every young person who learned about empathy and resilience through the example of those who started over in old age. 5 years after Martha's passing, a statue was unveiled in the center of Asheville. It showed an elderly woman sitting on a bench with a duck in her lap, smiling calmly. At the base of the statue, a plaque read, "In memory of Martha Miller, who taught us that the end of a road can be the beginning of an extraordinary journey, and that true greatness lies not in never falling, but in always getting back up." On the day of the unveiling, representatives from all the Wings of Hope centers attended. There were elderly people who had been helped by the project, Martha's family members, officials, and ordinary people who had been inspired by her story. Patricia, now 65 years old and coordinator of one of the centers in New York City, gave the main speech. "My grandmother used to say she wasn't special, but she was wrong. She was special precisely because she was ordinary, because she showed that ordinary people, through extraordinary choices, can change the world. Not the whole world at once, but the world of some people. And those people change the world of others." And so on. Today, looking at this statue, I don't just see my grandmother. I see every elderly person who found hope when they thought there was none left. I see every animal that received care when it was abandoned. I see each of us who learned that it's never too late, we're never too old, it's never too impossible. The duck represented here in this statue was named Apollo. That's how it all started. But the real Apollo wasn't the animal. It was the hope he represented, the possibility of a fresh start, the proof that from the worst circumstances, the best opportunities can arise. My grandmother lived to be 101 years old, but it was in her last 26 years after being abandoned on a roadside at 75 that she truly lived. And in that, there's a lesson for all of us. It's never too late to start living for real. It's never too late to find purpose. It's never too late to make a difference. When Patricia finished speaking, everyone was silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping, and soon everyone was on their feet, applauding not just for the statue, but for the living memory of everything Martha Miller represented. That night at the farm Martha helped create, the elderly gathered as they always did, sitting in a circle, sharing stories, taking care of each other. The poultry houses were full of well-cared-for birds. The community house was lit up and welcoming, and if anyone paid close attention, they could almost feel Martha's presence there. Not in a supernatural way, but in the way people treated each other with kindness, in the way each elderly person found purpose in caring for the animals, in the way the community welcomed new members, because that was Martha Miller's true legacy, not an organization or centers scattered around the world, but a philosophy of life. The idea that every person, no matter their age or circumstance, has value and can contribute. That mutual care between people and animals can heal wounds that time alone never would. And so, as the sun set over the farm in Asheville, a new generation of elderly people found hope where there had only been despair. They found family where there was loneliness. They found purpose where there was emptiness. All because 26 years earlier, a 75-year-old woman refused to accept abandonment as her end. She chose instead to turn it into a beginning. And that choice would echo through generations, touching thousands of lives, proving time and again that it is never too late to start over. We are never too old to make a difference. And the most painful endings can become the most extraordinary beginnings. The end. Now tell us what you thought of this story. Did Martha Miller's journey move you? Do you believe she made the right choices? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit like and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories. Your support makes all the difference.